In Luke chapter 23, verse 46, we find these words. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. The curtain in the temple was torn in two. Jesus had cried out, finished. And then he breathes out one last prayer before he dies. He begins and he ends his crucifixion with a prayer. These words that Jesus said here in Luke 23 come from Psalm 31. And one writer speculated that he might have even been silently reciting these until he came down to verse 5. Psalm 31 begins this way. In you, Lord, I seek refuge. Do not let me ever be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Rescue me speedily. Be a rock of refuge for me, a strong fortress to save me. You indeed are my rock and fortress. For your name's sake, lead and guide me. Take me out of the net that is hidden for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hand I commit my spirit. I believe that this final prayer of Jesus teaches us two things. And the first thing I believe it teaches us is how to live. There was a movie that came out about 30 years ago that gained little notoriety, and yet it told a powerful story. It's really one of my favorites. It's called The Doctor. The lead is played by William Hurt, whose character is a surgeon. He is stricken with throat cancer, and he faces the specter of death. And this doctor, who commanded his life, literally, commanded his operating room, took charge of his patients and their lives, he rages in anger at those who now take charge of him. With this story, one is dramatically confronted with this truth. Our lives are not, nor have they ever been, our own. In both Matthew and Luke, Jesus refers to God as a thief who comes in the night while we sleep and think we are secure. It's not a very flattering picture, but it is a truthful one. In the end, the one who so graciously gives life is also the one who so unexpectedly takes it. Nobody has a right to take anything from anyone else without permission unless he owns what he takes in the first place. I remember as a teenager in youth services when the speaker would be there and challenge us and motivate us. And then to commit our lives to Christ. And then we would sing a song at the end with words like, take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. And they would give an altar call and pressure would be applied. And we would be making decisions for Jesus. But ultimately there's no real decision here. God doesn't accept our lives so much as he takes them, because they belong to him. Paul wrote, you are not your own. You are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body, which is God's. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31 tells us, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. An idol's not a fearful thing. A blind impersonal force is not a fearful thing. For these are fabricated through the projection of our desires to serve our own self-interests. But to have your life grabbed, taken over by the living God, now that's a fearful thing. Why? Because who knows what God will do with our lives? Where will he send us? What will he call us to be? What will he call us to do? There are a lot of people who look at us and they think that we're weak. that Jesus and religion is some kind of crutch upon which we lean because we're too weak to walk through life by ourselves. I tell you, it takes guts. It takes courage to hand over the most precious possession, our lives, to hand that over to God. And it takes grace to admit and to face the truth that ultimately our lives are not so much ours to give as they are God's to take. Jesus' final dying prayer is a prayer of absolute trust in God. In his commentary on the Gospel of Luke, William Barclay suggests that these words that I shared with you from Psalm 31 verse 5, "Into your hands I commit my spirit," is a prayer that Jewish children were taught by their mothers to pray as they went to sleep each night. So here's a prayer that Jesus would have learned as a boy, now being offered to his heavenly Father as he approaches death. Jesus is teaching us how to pray. And he's teaching us how to respond to life when it goes, especially when it goes against us. Our lives are in God's hands. And when we are facing darkness and despair, when we're facing the unknown, or even being forced to look at and perhaps even walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you and I can pray, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." The second thing that I see here is that Jesus teaches us how to die. Jesus shows us that when it comes to dying, that there's a way to do it. Now, some would read these words as giving up or giving in. And that's not what's going on here. Jesus is actually commanding and taking charge. For the previous 12 to 15 hours, he has been manhandled and abused. However, he will not allow his tormentors to have the last word of his life or to determine the significance and meaning of the cross. In this prayer, for this brief moment, he takes his life back into his own hands, and then he trustingly lays it into the hands of his Father. As a pastor, I have been privileged to enter that holy space, and it is holy, where someone having battled some terrible illness has grown calm, and they're now at peace. It's not the peace of some noble defeat or just simply giving in to the circumstances. It's the peace that comes from Jesus Christ. They've wept. They've feared. Maybe they've raged. They've used all the medical resources at their disposal. They have submitted to doctors. They have been obedient in following their families' and friends' wishes. They've put on a good face in a bad situation. But now they've taken charge. And they say, it's enough. And they give back to God the most precious gift that God has graciously given them. One writer said, it is the highest and greatest act of stewardship. I'm still mulling that over in my mind to grasp the fullness of that. But I think they're right. When we're young, we consider the question, what will I do with my life? An equally important question to answer is, what will I do with my death? As I've talked with Christians down through the years, it seems to me that the common thread is not so much the fear of death itself, because we know what awaits us on the other side. But rather, it's the process of dying that we tend to fear. The possibility of pain and suffering, of being alone and abandoned, the loss of dignity and control, Most people with whom I speak hope we'll die in our sleep, or at least it will be so painless and so quick that we never knew what hit us. But you know, that's not how Jesus died. It is not how he died. He endured all of those things that you and I fear. And he endured those things and emerged the victor in spite of the pain and the suffering and the circumstances. How was he able to do that? Into your hands I commit my spirit. Jesus does in death what he has done throughout his life. He has entrusted himself to his Father's keeping. Moses told Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, that the only reason for their existence was an act of God. It wasn't because they were great or powerful or mighty or even wonderful. It was because, as quoting Moses, it was because the Lord loved you. The only reason Israel is here, the only reason our country is here, the only reason you and I are here this morning is the gracious act of a loving God. And you and I have a choice today. We can foolishly attempt to preserve ourselves by ourselves, or we can commend ourselves and those we love to the giver of life. We live in a culture of victimization. On one hand, it is good and it is right and necessary that we recognize injustice and evil for what they are and acknowledge how it affects the lives of those who suffer from it and take action to oppose it. But victimization, though it's right to name it, ought never be something that forever names us. To be a perpetual victim is to always have your life named and claimed and determined by the victimizer. What was Jesus' response to those who would try to victimize and abuse him? He said, I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down. I have the power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. From where did this power come? In life and in death. He committed his spirit to his Father. Two ministers were discussing the life work of a mutual friend who was a distinguished scholar. After more than 50 years of research and writing, he died at the age of 80. One of the ministers said, I would think his groundbreaking work will be of lasting significance. To which the other minister replied, God only knows. And you know, honestly, that's about all that can be said about any of us. Frankly, about all of us. What does my life mean? Will any of it endure? Have I counted for something? You know, as people, we are, and especially in the last 20 years or so obsessed about legacy. And we build monuments, we have children, we carve our names in granite. We commit ourselves to institutions and corporations and causes and family. What is the significance of it all? God only knows. And so I believe that the best we can do is to reckon our lives as an offering to him and entrust him with the results. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When that is our daily prayer, then we can live and die and live again in confidence and in hope. Let's do that.